The reason we live in a matriarchy and not a patriarchy. Let's talk about the facts. There are generally two genders, male and female. This is determined by chromosomes and systems like primary sex hormonal cycling and genes. We know it's a fact that hormones change brain chemistry. In short, men and women think differently and are more likely to have sex-specific brain patterns. In society, we see that men are likely to operate from a position where they rely on logical processes and reason, often at the detriment of emotional and social awareness. Likewise, we see that women are likely to operate from a position that favors emotional socio-brain processes, often at the detriment of logical processes and sound reason objectivity. Because of this, it can be observed that the majority of average men in today's society tend not to be as successful as the majority of average women in today's society. This is because success in today's society is more dependent on social psychology and support networks than it used to be before. The world reveals a lack of understanding of adult male emotional psychology and psychology in general. It's not that men are inherently bad at this, but that the social impulses to communicate emotionally aren't always primary for men to the same degree as they are for women. This isn't a problem by itself, but it is a problem in a post-tribal world where social support networks and social psychology are the main factors in survival. People can become very socially isolated, thus dead-ended, if their socio-emotional communicative capabilities aren't strong enough to secure sufficient social support networks. A man's drive may instead be directed towards something else, like a hyperfixation on hobby interests, or a character trait uncooperative towards social normalcy, such as divergency. Let me explain a bit more. The state of our society has long evolved from religious, feudal order in times past. Men had inherent value and respect due to their nature being more likely to innovate, take risks, lead by force, non-covertly, and be more likely to diverge. Divergency as in thinking, behaving outside of the norm, often leading to innovation or other solutions to problems. This was required in an undeveloped society because, in essence, men needed to behave like this, so society could properly develop in terms of sciences, risky infrastructure ideas, and centralization of power and resources. This is why in third world countries, we still see some resemblance of traditional patriarchy. Now, since we have developed enough as a society where inventions are no longer the primary requirement, many of the traits men are generally naturally proficient in are not as important, which leads to a loss of inherent social value. For example, in the West, divergency is seen as rebellious, and leading by force is seen as aggression. This is a sign that the primary value shift of society has turned to socio-economic and socially structured psychology patterns. The shift also aligns with integral theory maps of psychological levels, such as maps made by Ken Wilber and Claire W. Graves. And just like I said before, women excel at emotional socio-processes. In essence, being a woman comes with having a hormonally feminized brain and emotional configuration that likely involves, relative to males, an active desire towards socio-emotional behavior and capabilities. In short, we live in a world where the likely female predisposition is prioritized, a world where social support network psychology is key to living an independent and healthy life. Especially since the introduction of technologies such as the internet. I'm not just speaking without evidence. There is objective data that proves there are overwhelmingly more social support networks for women than men that exist, such as, but not limited to, more social programs, affirmative actions, studies that prove more positive reception happens to the female gender, the women a wonderful effect, favorable paternity laws, child custody, and also archetypes and social spaces which are not as negatively labeled There are also statistically more homeless men than women in almost all metrics that exist. Yet more women's shelters than men's shelters. This is exactly why it's appropriate to say we live in a matriarchy and not a patriarchy. Not because women are more capable, or that they are more prolific. Not because the top percentage of men control everything, but because the societal structure we live in favors a female predisposition. In short, it is by this definition that we live in a matriarchal system. Feminists will gaslight, saying we live in a patriarchy because men still control everything essentially, and while it is true, it is also true that the percentage of males who own all these things is only a small segment of the population. Many other factors determine the discrepancy. When it comes to the average man and average woman, average women have more advantages in this world than average men. Men are underserved by mental health resources. Programs to help those who have fallen are lacking. The family, community, religious safety nets of the mid to late 20th century have evaporated. Our peers, particularly female potential mates, view sensitivity or emotional need as weakness to be shunned. We are held to traditional roles out of conflict of interest. The world labels male spaces for support networks negatively, like incel. Resources for the average man are often unpalatable or unusable today, without massive consequences. Equality is a covert way of gaining power. People aren't equal. Yoking those with different traits to the same standard favors some over others. Male psychology tends to battle differences overtly, not covertly under the guise of equality. Consider the debate on women's pay disparity. The argument was women get paid less than men. Equality groups formed to bridge the gap with affirmative action. The gap wasn't due to discrimination. Women worked fewer hours, chose lower-paying industries, didn't need to work as hard to match a man's quality of life. Equality is like raising wages for women who work less to match men who work harder. While wages may be equal, the result isn't fair. Men who work harder feel abused, getting less than those doing less. This dynamic happens across different facets of life for men. The solution is interoperability based on traits. Women tend to excel in areas men lack. Men excel in areas women don't. Statistics should reflect this domination. The problem is weaponizing social support networks against men's support networks, combined with a society favoring social support psychology over male psychology. These should be independent. Men should have support networks favoring their disposition. Society's networks shouldn't only adhere to women's dispositions. The ruling authorities, like governments, have not acted in our best interest.